Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the November 13th City Council meeting. Would you please stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Could I get a roll call, please?
Councilmember Brigham?
Here.
Vice Mayor Russell?
Here.
Councilmember Wolter?
Here.
Councilmember Bagby? Absent. Mayor Palla?
Here. And for the record, Councilmember Bagby did call and mention that she was ill this evening. Okay, conflict of interest. Does any city council member have anything to declare?
I'm not going to be able to sit on the cannabis issue.
Okay, and that would be item number 9.
Yes.
Okay, anybody else?
No, sir.
Okay, seeing none. We will move on to the agenda review, regular session. Any changes or deletions to the agenda? City Manager?
Mayor, staff has a couple of corrections to note in the agenda packet. Most specifically, for public hearing item number 7 in the packet, the resolution is listed as resolution 087-2016, and it should be resolution 2018. It's the correct year. That's on page 337.
That-
In addition, on item 8 of the agenda packet, the resolution number should be 088-2018. Is noted on the agenda as resolution number 087.
So that last one again, would you go over that one more time?
The change to the agenda is item 8. It's listed as resolution number 087-2018. It should be resolution number 088-2018.
Okay, anything else? Okay, seeing none. We'll move on to public comments. Any person wishing to speak to the City Council on any item not listed on the agenda may do so at this time. Members of the public have a right to speak on any item on the agenda during that item. Pursuant to the Brown Act, the City Council is not allowed to consider issues or take action on any item not listed on the agenda. Each person wishing to speak must come up to the podium when advised and speak directly into the microphone. There's also a book there if you'd be kind enough to sign your name. And each speaker will be limited to 3 minutes, and each speaker will be limited to speaking once under public comment. Would anybody like to address the City Council on any item not on the agenda? Okay, seeing no one, right? Yes, please, come on up.
Preston Addison, President, Cloverdale Unified School District.
Could you pull that up? Yeah, thank you.
You've probably already heard that we were at the board meeting for the Sonoma County Supervisors this morning. Mr. Kelley and I were there, and pleased to report that our collaboration with the city, the school district, and the county has resulted in an approved funding agreement to move forward with a solar heating project for the pool here in town. So I think it's a big win, and thank James Gore for his support on that.
Well, thank you.
Good. That's a good thing.
A lot of work went into that, and I want to thank our city staff as well as the county and Supervisor Gore and the school district. It's a great collaboration and one of many that we've implemented, and hopefully more to come. Thank you for all your hard work. Okay, anybody else want to address the City Council on any item not on the agenda? Okay, seeing none, we will close the public comment and move on to the consent calendar. All items under consent will be considered together by one action of the council unless any council member or member of the public requests that an item be removed and considered separately. Does any council member have any item to be removed? Okay, seeing none, would any member of the public like to have an item removed? Okay, seeing none, I'll bring it back. Somebody like to introduce the consent calendar?
I'll move consent, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
I'll second, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, any discussion on that? Okay, seeing none, can we get a roll call vote, please?
Councilmember Brigham,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Russell,
Aye.
Councilmember Wolter,
Aye.
Mayor Palla.
Aye. Okay, we'll move on to, we have no communications, so we have two public hearings this evening. The first public hearing would be consideration of a general plan amendment related to the Alexander Valley Resort project, an amendment to the Alexander Resort specific plan, and an amendment to the zoning ordinance, a development agreement modification, and a CEQA addendum to the 2009 project EIR. Assistant City Manager.
Mayor, council members, again, this item is a proposed several amendments to the Alexander Valley Resort, which was approved in 2008. You know, the project's been around a long time, and this effort is really to help the project's marketability. We've been working with the applicant for several months and trying to make the project more attractive to developers. We do have Jerry Haig, who's going to run through a quick PowerPoint and give us just a kind of an overview of what the amendments are. At the end, we will ask you to adopt some resolutions and introduce some ordinances. And I know the developer's here, along with his team and his attorney. So, Jerry?
Thanks, Kevin. Mr. Mayor, members of the council, pleasure to be here again. It seems like we're here a lot for this project, which is good because progress is being made. So as Kevin pointed out, this was originally approved by City Council in 2009. We annexed the property in 2010. We just move ahead so we can be consistent with our PowerPoint. So as Kevin pointed out, the applicant has requested a number of changes to make the project more marketable to the resort development community. So that necessitates.
Could you speak into the microphone,
Sure,
please? Or
I
you can
can.
pull that up right out of there and
How's
put it.
that?
So
How's that?
Yeah. that's
Thank
better.
you. So this necessitates changes to the land use plan and the general plan, updates to the Alexander Valley Resort specific plan, updates to the site zoning, which is SP1, specific plan 1, and modifications to the approved development agreement that was approved 2.5 years ago by the City Council. A bit about where it is and what it is. It's about 267 acres of land, mostly vacant, south side of town, just north of the airport and east of the freeway. Again, it was originally submitted in the early 2000s, and it was approved for a 100 to 150 room resort, upscale hotel, with an 18-hole golf course, some residential and commercial component, as well as a significant open space component. Quick location map. We talked about this already. Location map. Are we going forward here? So I'm not seeming to get. Here we go. A new slide. So this shows the existing development plan for the property. The changes proposed by the applicant would be to enlarge the resort component of the plan, which would allow more of a spread out type of configuration for the future resort. The applicant has been advised by the development community that the current configuration would result in more of a high-rise type resort configuration, which is really not appropriate for Sonoma County, for the rural portion of Sonoma County. If approved, this would allow a more rambling, low, 1- and 2-story low type of configuration. I've been advised this is the configuration that the Four Seasons is taking down in Hillsburg, which is under construction. Because we have to satisfy CEQA, a state law, we, the staff, have done an initial study looking at all the environmental topics required by CEQA, and we believe that an addendum to the existing 2009 EIR is justified with the finding of nearly no significant impacts that have not been previously identified and mitigated. This is a slide showing the proposed development plan. Again, the light purple area is the resort area, which would be enlarged. The residential would be slightly enlarged at the expense of some open space uses, which would have been occupied by the golf course, which is now an optional, not a mandatory item. This requires general plan amendment to change the land uses, a specific plan amendment to change the land uses, and to be consistent with the amended general plan as required by state law. The applicant took this to the Planning Commission in October. They recommended approval of all of the project elements and the addendum to the City Council. And our recommendation to you is to approve by resolution the general plan amendment, the specific plan amendment, and by ordinance change the SP1, existing site zoning, and make modifications to the development agreement. And the attorney is here to make comments if you have questions or comments about the development agreement, to answer those. And that concludes staff presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from council? Seeing none, City Manager.
Mayor, Council, if I may, just to elaborate a little bit on the project. As you know, this project has been in the works for quite some time. And the developer obviously went through an RFP process to seek a partner to actually build and construct the project. And I think it was through that process it was identified that to really support the marketability and ultimate feasibility of construction, there were some changes needed to the entitlements that the city previously granted to this project. Really what you're seeing tonight is cleanup. It's not a change or an increase in the number of units or in the intensity of the resort component of the project. It's really just to enable some flexibility in how the site is developed and reflect the removal of the golf course is a big change in terms of the overall land use. As you know, the council previously had removed that as a requirement. And as a result of that, when you see a change in how much of the land use acreage is really reflective that that golf course has kind of gone away, and it allows for that to be occupied by future residential development. But it doesn't change the overall number of units or increase it. It's just increasing the area in which residential development is allowed, and likewise, based on feedback from successful resort developers, kind of expanding the footprint of the resort component and the resort residential uses on the property. So that's really what you're seeing tonight. Obviously, there's a number of entitlements that you're that are required to effectuate those proposed changes. The first of which is obviously the CEQA component. We did address that through a pretty extensive review with a focus on kind of airport-related issues, which resulted in the addendum that's in your packet. And the recommendation of staff is to kind of follow, as outlined in your packet, adoption of the environmental document first, followed by adoption of the general plan amendment, adoption of the specific plan amendment, and then introduced by title only the two ordinances, ordinance number 725 and 726, at which time we'll bring those back for approval on the consent calendar, assuming you do support their approval tonight. With that said, we'll turn it back to council.
Thank you. Any questions from council? Okay. This is a public hearing. I'd like to go ahead and open the public hearing. If you'd like to address the city council on this item, this would be the time to do so. You'd have 3 minutes. Come up, state your name, and sign the book, and this is your opportunity. Seeing no one rise, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing, bring it back to council. We have quite a few things here. So the first one would be to adopt City Council Resolution 085-2018, approving an addendum to the 2009 Certified Alexander Valley Resort Specific Plan Environmental Impact Report, EIR, and that is on page 319. Somebody would like to introduce that?
I'll introduce it by title only, Mr. Mayor. City of Cloverdale City Council Resolution Number 085-2018. Resolution of the City Council of the City of Cloverdale adopting a CEQA addendum to the 2009 Final Environmental Impact Report for the Alexander Valley Resort Project and making findings that the proposed project is consistent with the Cloverdale Municipal Airport Comprehensive Airport Land Use Plan located on approximately 267 acres of land lying east of Asti Road, west of the Russian River, south of Santana Drive, and north of Cloverdale Municipal Airport.
I'll second that, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion on that? Seeing none, can we get a roll call vote, please?
Councilmember Brigham,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Russell,
Aye.
Councilmember Wolter,
Aye.
Mayor Palla,
Aye.
Student Liaison Tucker.
Aye.
Okay, we'll move on to the next item under there would be to adopt City Council Resolution 086-2018, approving amendments to the Cloverdale General Plan relating to the Alexander Valley Resort specific plan, which is on page 327.
I'll offer the resolution. City of Cloverdale City Council Resolution Number 086-2018, resolution of the City Council of the City of Cloverdale approving an amendment to the general plan on approximately 267 acres of land lying east of Asti Road, west of the Russian River, south of Santana Drive, and north of Cloverdale Municipal Airport be approved. APN numbers 116-260-0212, 116-310-013, 014, 117050, 010, 011, and 012, 017, 024, 026, 027, 028, and 29.
I'll second that, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Any discussion on that? Okay, seeing none, can we get a roll call vote, please?
Councilmember Brigham,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Russell,
Aye.
Councilmember Wolter,
Aye.
Mayor Palla,
Aye.
and Tucker.
Aye.
Okay, we move on to the next item would be to adopt City Council Resolution 087-2018, approving amendments to the Alexander Valley Resort Specific Plan, which is on page 337.
I'll offer that resolution by title only, Mr. Mayor. And, we've seen this so much, I just don't have any more questions for you. And I just hope
We
the
have seen it
project
all.
moves forward and we're successful. With that being said, City of Cloverdale City Council Resolution Number 087-2018, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Cloverdale adopting an amendment to the Alexander Valley Resort Specific Plan on approximately 267 acres of land lying east of Asti Road, west of the Russian River, south of Santana, and north of Cloverdale. APNs 116-260-012, 116-310-013, 014, 117, 050, 010, APN number 011-012, 017, and 024, 026, 027, 028, and 029.
I'll second.
Okay, any discussion on that? Seeing none, can we get a roll call vote, please?
Councilmember Brigham,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Russell,
Aye.
Councilmember Wolter,
Aye.
Mayor Palla,
Aye.
and Tucker.
Aye.
Okay, the next item would be to introduce and waive the first reading of ordinance number 725-2018 of the City Council of the City of Cloverdale, amending Cloverdale Municipal Code zoning, making certain changes to section 18.08.040, the SP-1 district, page 415.
I'll offer it by title only. It's the draft ordinance number 725-2018, an ordinance of the City of Cloverdale amending Chapter 18 of the City of Cloverdale zoning ordinance, making changes to the specific plan -1 SP1 zoning district for the Alexander Valley Resort project.
Second.
Second, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, Vice Mayor Russell, second that, and, okay, any discussion on that? Okay, can we get a roll call vote, please?
Councilmember Brigham,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Russell,
Aye.
Councilmember Wolter,
Aye.
Mayor Palla,
Aye.
Tucker.
Aye.
Okay, the last item would be to introduce and waive the first reading of ordinance number 726-2018 of the City Council of the City of Cloverdale, approving modifications to an approved development agreement for the Alexander Valley Resort project, which is on page 425.
I'll read this by title only. Mr. Mayor, City of Cloverdale, City Council Ordinance Number 726-2018, an ordinance of the City of Cloverdale approving an amendment to a development agreement with Spite Properties to LLC pertaining to the development of the Alexander Valley Resort Project, located on approximately 267 acres of land lying east of Asti Road, west of the Russian River, south of Santana Drive, and north of Cloverdale Municipal Airport. And I will do the APNs. 116-260-012, 116-310-013, and -014. 117-050-010, 011, 012, 017, 024, 026, 027, 028, and 029.
I'll second.
Okay, any discussion on that? Seeing none, can we get a roll call vote, please?
Councilmember Brigham.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Russell.
Aye.
Councilmember Wolter.
Aye.
Mayor Palla.
Aye.
Tucker.
Aye.
Thank you. Thank you, and now we need to see you get some action over there. Get that place built.
Good luck.
Get that place built sooner than later. Thank you, guys. Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to the next item, number 8. It's a resolution number 087-2018, amending the inclusionary housing ordinance fee and reaffirm the application of inclusionary housing requirements on rental projects after the passage of AB 1505.
This would be 088.
Okay, so that's the one I missed. Let me, 088. Okay. Assistant City Manager.
Yes. Mayor, council members, this is an amendment to the city's inclusionary housing fee. With us tonight is Nora Brown from David Rosen and Associates. That was the consultant the city hired to help us come up with what the fee would be. And those are both attachments in your staff report. There's two attachments. Just a little background. The city's inclusionary requirement does require that requires 15% of all dwelling units in projects of 5 or more have some sort of affordability restrictions on a certain number of the units. The developer does have the option to pay what we call an in-lieu fee. The in-lieu fee is a way for the developer to meet the requirements of the inclusionary housing ordinance without actually constructing the units. The current fee was adopted in 2008. It ranges from $2,800 to just over $5,200, depending on the size of the units. The proposed fee ranges from $24,000 for a studio to $45,000 for a 7-bedroom house. I have some examples of other cities, and there's some differences between the way Cloverdale does it and other cities that do affect the way we apply these fees, and we can get into that in a second. The revenue that's generated through this fee is for the city to use for affordable housing projects, like Cherry Creek, for example. This is one nice thing about inclusionary fees are there's less restrictions on those as opposed to state money and grants and other types of funding. So the way the fee is calculated is defined in the inclusionary housing ordinance, and it's basically based on what we call the gap, and that's really what a moderate income family, the mortgage they could afford versus what the house actually costs. 15% of that is what the fee is, and that's what David Rosen and Nora did in their studies, and you can see all the detail that went into figuring out the average house cost. One other topic that we'd like to talk about is the application of the inclusionary housing fee on rental units. There was a Supreme Court case, the Palmer versus City of Los Angeles in 2009, that really questioned the city's ability to impose inclusionary requirements on multifamily projects. Since then, in 2017, AB 1506 was adopted. 1506, sorry. That clears the way for cities to, again, start imposing inclusionary requirements on multifamily projects. So unless otherwise directed, staff will start that process again of imposing inclusionary requirements on multifamily projects of 5 or more. The fee was reviewed by the Planning Subcommittee in September and was recommended to move on to the Council. So I don't know if Nora's available, if you'd like her to come up and talk about how they calculated the fee or any types of fee questions. Otherwise, she can just be available for questions. And I also have some information, if it's interest to the council, on what other cities are charging.
Very good, thank you. Would the council like to hear?
No, this is good.
No, I'm good.
All right, so questions from council?
Well, I'd just like to hear what other cities are charging at some point and discuss it just a little bit.
Yeah. Okay, so you want to touch on that, what other cities?
So
are-
there's a couple ways. The small cities in Sonoma County, Windsor, Cotati, and Healdsburg are the ones we looked at. They charge an inclusionary fee on all the units that are constructed. So if you build 20 units, you're paying this fee across the board for all of them. Whereas the Cloverdale inclusionary ordinance, you only pay a fee on what would have been your inclusionary requirement. So say you had to build 2 units for inclusionary, you're paying the fee on those 2 units. So in Windsor, it's a sliding scale. It goes from $3,500 for a 1,000, it's based on the size of the home. So for a 1,000 square foot house, it's $3,500 up to a maximum of $23,000 for a larger house. So again, that's, if you're doing a 100 lot subdivision, you're paying that on every one of the units versus ours, which is, so our fee's a little higher, but it's really, it's cheaper based on the way we apply the fee. In Cotati, they have a minimum of $1,300 on a really small house, all the way up to $29,000. So there's a lot of sliding scales based on in Cotati's example, it's based on the value of the home. So the more expensive the house, the more fee you're paying. Smaller houses, you would pay less. Healdsburg is also a sliding scale. The minimum in Healdsburg for a 1,300 square foot house would be about $2,500. Everything up to 1,300 is exempted. So you're building a subdivision of 1,200 square foot houses, there's no inclusionary requirement. So that's a way to sort of get to smaller, affordable by design type of theory. Healdsburg goes up to a maximum of $15,000 for a large house. So again, applied to all the houses. That's what I have. That pretty much concludes mine. And I don't know if you'd like Nora to come up.
No, that's fine, just she's available if there's
Yes.
questions. Thank you.
Thanks.
Any other questions from council? Yes, Councilmember Wolter.
Thank you. So just one more time, what are our fees going to go from? I know they range from $2,800 to $5,200 right now. And we're proposing on this increase that they'll go to what?
The minimum would be $24,000 for a studio, up to $45,200 for a 7-bedroom.
Okay. So the only thing, and I'm fine with those fees because we're not including them on all the units like some of the cities are. The only thing that I want to make sure is that you mentioned that we give the developer the option to either pay into the fees or to construct something. And I have to tell you, I don't think that should be the developer's choice. I think it should be our choice. You know, we collect all these fees and it sits in a pile and we never do anything with it. So if you could just explain how we could achieve that if the council so approves.
Mayor, Council, to address, through the mayor, if I can address Councilmember Wolter's question.
Please go ahead.
The question you raise is actually provided for in our ordinance. The developer has an option to obviously pay the fee, build the units, or dedicate land for affordable housing purposes. Then it has to be based on an appraisal. We did discuss that issue and determined that it was, under the Supreme Court decision, it's required that we provide the developer with an option whether to, and there's some flexibility in implementation of those options. Ultimately, what it does require is for the city to revise our inclusionary housing ordinance. And that's something that council had directed us at your previous meeting to revise and update the inclusionary. And I think what staff would like to do, considering Councilmember Wolter's comments, is come back with some options for the council to consider as part of an update to the zoning ordinance so that, one, we want to make sure it comports with state law, but also really clearly outlines the options and the legal implications of those options for council's consideration as part of an overall ordinance update. Because really what we're doing tonight is just, we're just updating the fee.
The fees,
To reflect current market conditions. And we would want to really outline those options very clearly for the council as part of an ordinance amendment. So I guess the short answer to your question, Gus, is Councilmember Wolter, is we have to be careful in imposing, one singular option. We do have to provide options, but there are a range of options that we can build into an update in our ordinance.
Okay. Yeah, and I don't mean to be non-negotiable on that issue with the developer, but I think it's incumbent on us to make that decision. We're looking for money to go ahead and do the Cherry Creek project, and maybe instead of money, the developer could go in and finish off a unit or do something as opposed to just writing out a check. So, okay, thank you.
And I just want to piggyback. I certainly support having the discretion for the city. And I do think we do have some funds set aside, and the Cherry Creek project really should be moving forward. I'm not really sure. As Councilmember Wolter said, money sitting in a pot doing nothing, and I think it's time that we really take a serious look at what we want that project to look like, and let's get some action on it. It's long overdue.
Mayor, staff absolutely agrees. The Assistant City Manager, Community Development Director had a presentation before the Planning Commission on the concept plan for Cherry Creek, and staff anticipates bringing that forward for council review and consideration to see whether that's the concept that's been developed for that property is supported by council. So that we'll be bringing that forward, and I think as part of that discussion, we'll want to discuss options for actually financing the proposed improvements and how we might get to actually see the project be constructed.
Thank you. Any other comments from council before I open the public hearing?
Just that I'm happy that we're updating this finally. Yeah.
Finally, thank you. All right, this is a public hearing. Anybody in the audience that would like to address the city council on this item, this would be the time to do so. Please come forward, state your name for the record, and sign the book.
Hi, thank you. Good evening, Mayor, members of the council, staff as well. My name is Jason Turner. As it stands written right now, I just have one clarifying question that would clear things up for me quite a bit. The inclusionary funds that we may be able to collect from developers who choose to write that check, should we give them that option, and it goes into the fund that we are discussing to potentially be used for Cherry Creek, are those funds, do they come with an asterisk? And for the sake of the record, I am using quotation marks. Do they come with an asterisk as to maybe how that money can be spent, or the type of residence that could then be in the area in which that money was allocated towards? Does it come with stipulations? Thank you.
City Manager.
Mayor, if you like, I'll address that question. That's a very good question. I think as Assistant City Manager alluded, there's more flexibility with inclusionary housing fees than a lot of other funding programs, though there are some requirements for the use, and it's established in the ordinance itself, and that is that they're intended to be used for the production and support of affordable housing, which includes different income levels. So it means from moderate to basically very or extremely low income households. So there's not a geographic requirement other than the monies be used for those affordable housing within the city. And there may be some opportunities if, in certain instances to use that funding if it was going to provide housing maybe adjacent to the city, but generally it's restricted to the city, and generally it's restricted by what income group you support, and that would be, a moderate income, which is 120% of area median income, all the way down to extremely low income. And just to note, the budget the city's annual budget does reflect that a portion of the inclusionary housing funds are used to fund staff support of affordable housing in our community. So it does fund ongoing staff costs for affordable housing work that's done within our community. And this is an example of bringing this fee study forward. This was paid for by inclusionary housing fees because it further and supports affordable housing in our city.
Thank you.
I'm sorry.
Well, this is a public hearing. Could you want to?
I'm sorry.
Let me just, anybody else want to address the city council on this item? Okay, seeing no one rise, we'll close the public hearing, bring it back to council. Councilmember Wolter, please.
Yeah, okay. Sorry, Mr. Mayor, I don't mean to
That's all right.
keep rambling, but, and David, if you could just correct me, just, from a historical standpoint, that inclusionary housing money that we collect from developers doesn't necessarily have to be used for new development. The Kings Valley, for example, I want to go back maybe 10 years ago, Marianne, maybe you remember, but we wrote a check out to them, and they went around and they put in new windows, new doors, new hot water heaters, and part of us doing that, they agreed to have those homes remain low to moderate income. So you can use it in all different ways. It just doesn't have to be for new construction. So.
Okay. Any other count? Okay. Great. We have a resolution here.
I'll offer the resolution.
Okay.
City of Cloverdale City Council Resolution Number 088, 2018. Resolution of the City Council of the City of Cloverdale adopting income limits, inclusionary housing cost criteria, and regional housing needs assessment distribution.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and second. Any discussion? Seeing none, can we get a roll call vote, please?
Councilmember Brigham,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Russell,
Aye.
Councilmember Wolter,
Aye.
Mayor Palla,
Aye.
Crawford.
Aye.
Okay, moving on to new business, item number 9. It's a review and discussion of proposed cannabis ordinance revisions. And let the record show that Councilmember Brigham is going to recuse herself. She's leaving the dais. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So it's a review and discussion of proposed cannabis ordinance revisions and provide direction to city staff on changes and whether to take the ordinance to the, and whether to take the ordinance to the planning commission. So,
Good evening,
City
Mayor, members of the council. As you just stated, the item before you tonight is review and discussion of the proposed revisions to the cannabis ordinance. As a reminder, at your September 25th meeting, staff gave a very detailed overview of the existing cannabis ordinance, including a background and history of the legislation that precipitated development of the ordinance, and we walked council through kind of 9 topical areas. And at that time, council provided feedback on each of those areas to staff. Staff took those comments and amended the ordinance to reflect the comments, at least in staff's interpretation of the consensus that was developed by the council. Included in your packet is a red line version of the ordinance that outlines the proposed revisions that staff drafted. But what we'd like to do tonight is just walk you through fairly quickly the 9 topical issues that were covered at your September 25th meeting and seek your concurrence. If you concur this evening, the goal would be to go ahead and forward the proposed revision to the commission because it is part of your zoning ordinance for further review and their recommendation before bringing it back to council. So without further ado, I'll kind of turn it over to our city attorney, Kate Cook, and Kate will walk you through the 9 topical issues this evening. All right. Thanks,
Sure.
Kate.
Thanks. Mayor and council, we are going to try to move quickly through this as we pretty much talked about this a lot. So we don't need to go through the history of cannabis tonight. But as we all know, we do have a commercial cannabis ordinance in place. And the council spent a considerable time in late September reviewing it. And although we are reviewing it, it is still in effect, and applicants may still apply for commercial cannabis permits in the city, with the exception of dispensaries. That process is currently on hold. And we reviewed 9 different topics at that meeting, and we're just going to dive right into them. And I'll just note at the forefront here, we've combined a few of those topics because they seemed to call for a combination and didn't have to actually be 9 in the end after that conversation flushed out. So the first topic that you all discussed and we got feedback on was cannabis events. They weren't addressed specifically in the ordinance, and council wanted to make sure we did that. So what we've done is add a section to the ordinance that says, that we've added a section to the ordinance that addresses temporary cannabis events, and allows the city manager to develop the application process, have someone apply. If it's denied, then the applicant may appeal to the council. One thing I did want to note on this was there was a mention during that discussion by council of perhaps having an ad hoc committee look at it first or something of the council. But in thinking about it more, if someone's denied and the appeal is to come to all of you, I wouldn't want to put you in the position of having 2 of you have been on the ad hoc. So we didn't include anything about the ad hoc. If you wanted to change that, now's the time to speak up. So that's how that one would work. And do you want me to just keep going?
No,
And if
I'd like to take them one by one.
Take a pause and address each one. So that's how we've addressed cannabis events in the draft language.
Thank you. Questions from council on this issue, number 1?
No questions, just a comment that I like the idea that it comes in front of the full city council as opposed to back to a subcommittee for an appeal.
Okay.
Okay, I think all 5 need to be in on that.
Okay.
Okay.
Carol, anything?
No, it's fine.
Okay, I'm going to open this up for the public. If anybody would like to address the city council on this issue number 1, this would be the time to do so. Okay, seeing no one rise, we'll bring it back to council. I think we're all good with that.
Okay.
Everybody, you good, Gus?
Yes.
Okay, so that's a go.
So the next issue, I've combined 2 of the issues on this one. One is the setbacks and distance requirements from sensitive uses that are required for commercial cannabis businesses. And the other one is the waivers that are available from those setbacks. They obviously are related, so I combined them onto one slide and one discussion item. During that meeting, we discussed setbacks, and the consensus of the council was not to increase any of the setbacks, but clarify some of the language, and also to make the waiver from setbacks available in certain clear instances when there's impassable physical barriers that exist between the uses, and there's also additional language about the walking path needing to be the same distance as the setback intention with that. We also added some clarifying language on how the setbacks are measured for each type of use, so it's very clear in each section of the ordinance how those distances are measured. And we kind of clarified as well, there was one use, the indoor commercial cultivation, the setback language was not clear, it was kind of defaulting to the state language, so we added more specific language, and the standard setbacks still remain 600 feet from schools, K-12 schools, public or private, and daycare, 200 feet from parks, libraries, and youth centers, and generally 100 feet from residential zoning, although with outdoor commercial cultivation, the setbacks are higher in terms of setbacks from property lines and residential, although it's really only allowed in industrial, and there aren't very many, we don't anticipate very many applicants for that use. So that summarizes the setbacks and waiver language, how we heard it at that meeting, if there's any questions.
Okay, thank you. Questions from council?
Not so far.
So just to clarify, on the waivers pertaining to setbacks,
Yes.
will that be over the counter as opposed to coming in front of the city council?
So the waivers, let's see, they're in, I think it's 25. It is, it's the Planning Commission. That's what the council directed at the last meeting. So the language specifically reads that the location requirements may be waived. It previously said decision maker, which was varied depending on the use. But what we had heard at that meeting was planning commission and at a noticed public hearing. And they have to meet the showing first before they even get there.
Are we all still good with that? I'm starting to lean towards the point where I'd like as much approved at City Hall by the city manager and the assistant city manager, and if it doesn't go, or if there's no satisfaction there, then it comes to the council.
As an appeal.
As an
That's
appeal.
how I feel.
I mean, I
Okay.
just feel everything should be, the waivers and everything should be approved at City Hall.
Okay,
By the city manager.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or the
That's what it should be.
assistant.
so
Like any business.
Or his
Okay.
designee, yeah.
and if there's an appeal, say,
It would come to the city council.
it would come to the
Come
city
here, yeah.
council, okay?
And I know the city staff would lay out the reasons why they denied it clearly.
Yeah. and
Right,
let people
okay.
appear and, yeah.
Okay. And I definitely, I'm going to hold my comments until after the public input, but
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about the dispensary distance as well, so. Okay, any other comments from council?
No, not so far,
No,
not yet.
I'm going to open this up. Would anybody in the audience like to address the city council on this item, issue number 2 and 7? This would be the time to do so.
This is probably the most appropriate spot for me to make comments I have. I'm Preston Addison, president of the Cloverdale Unified School District. Our concerns that we've come before you with before are merited by the fact that since the legalization of marijuana, the increase in cannabis use amongst our teenagers has been real and measurable here in Cloverdale. We have a level of selling marijuana, including edibles and vape cartridges, amongst our teens like I've never seen in 20 years in Cloverdale. This is no fault of the businesses in town that are in the cannabis industry, but it is a change we have to grapple with, and some of the businesses have stepped up to do just that. The school board's main concern is the sightlines from the schools to cannabis-related facilities that are open to the public. And we've given our position on those concerns, and clearly an attempt is being made to address those. It's also being addressed in zoning changes that I don't see here. I think they're in a different section. Your proposed zoning changes seem to solve the issue, and yes, we're aware of the impact on areas available to do business. Though if you grandfather in a facility to a location that is clearly visible to students on our campus, you then in large part negate the zoning changes. The criticism about getting involved early in the process is without merit. This issue was never brought before us. As soon as I became aware of the locations being considered for adult use dispensaries open to the public, I came forward and spoke up, even though I and my family have been threatened again and again. The track record of speaking up is like this. The school district came forward when a Quickie Mart was proposed about a half a block from our elementary school. We opposed the location. Now daily, after trying to teach kids from Jefferson Elementary School good eating habits, I watch the after-school wave of students stop in for their afternoon high-sugar snacks. When a smoke shop was proposed near our middle school, our superintendent came before you to oppose that location. Now it's a major problem for our students. We think locating an adult use dispensary open to the public within view of the playground is a poor choice. This is a representative democracy where you've been elected to make decisions for our town, and I've been elected to make decisions for our schools. Please just make a decision that any reasonable adult would make when looking at the situation. Look at the most recent local election results, and I think you'll see that your constituents want reasonable decision makers in these seats making reasonable decisions. I'd like to see you make decisions on these items so that we can move forward onto more productive pursuits together. It's a better use of our energy. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Steve Stewart. I'm the vice principal at Cloverdale High School. I can say that we have seen a huge increase in the use of cannabis-related products. We've seen a huge increase in cannabis cartridges on campus. We have a major problem at Cloverdale High School, and it's related to cannabis, and it's related to other drugs as well. And so I would say, please be careful in the decisions that you make, because they are going to affect our students. And we're seeing that at Cloverdale High School. We are taking steps to combat this. We're looking at putting vape detectors in every bathroom, in every locker room. We're looking at increasing the number of cameras we have on campus. But this is a huge problem for us right now, and we ask that you make these decisions carefully. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to address the City Council on this item?
Good evening, everyone. My name's Erin Gore. Do I need to register this guy?
No, you're doing fine.
This is
Thank
Tom
you.
Gore. Thank you for your patience with both of us this evening. I think this is a really good suggestion with regards to setbacks and waivers. I think it accomplishes the goal of having an ordinance, and I think it also allows some flexibility for the businesses here trying to operate. I commend you, Council Wolter, for trying to have everything at the staff level, because I feel like the staff has done a really good job of creating an ordinance that allows for business success. Sorry. The other thing I think it's important to note, working with the high school and the school district to create a cannabis awareness program. And it's really important to note the data shows that when you allow legalization in communities, it actually reduces teen use. So commend you for, again, an ordinance that allows a path to legalization to drive out the illicit market. And thank you very much.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to address the City Council on this item? Okay, seeing no one, we'll close the public input, bring it back to council. I'd just like to address the dispensary, the 600 feet. I'm not comfortable with that. You know, I feel very strongly that we asked the school district to step up, to go back, to talk to their constituents, talk to the teachers, take a look at what's going on, and bring back a recommendation for us to consider. And I think we really should take that recommendation seriously, and we should consider that recommendation. And I certainly did. I voiced it last time, and I certainly share that same concern. I think we should make the dispensary location 1,000 feet from schools with certain waivers, and that gets into the barriers. We talked about obstructed view, the way the entrance, the signage and all that, but that's something staff can work through in the application. But that waiver could be something that they can apply for in unique situations, but otherwise I think it should be 1,000 feet from the dispensary. So, Councilmember Wolter, Vice Mayor, any comments?
Yeah, I have to tell you, I'm comfortable with 600 feet. I really think if the city's on top of its game, we know where the schools are. There's only 3 of them in town. And staff knows where City Council is coming from, that we want them, I don't want to use the word camouflage, but they need to be disguised a little bit. In the conversation I had earlier today with Preston, and Preston, I'm going to quote a few things out of that conversation that we talked about. We talked about Quonset Botanical, for example, and the fact that it's a dispensary makes all the difference in the world to Preston, and I assume his school board as well. But he did indicate that if they were not open during school hours, he would be okay with it. And I know in speaking with some of the folks from Quonset Botanical, they had and they have, if it goes forward, every intention of camouflaging that building so that it's not predominantly a smoke shop. It gives a different appearance. So, after my conversation with him, I think the 600 feet is fine. The city staff knows what we want, and I'm sorry to hear that the youth in the town are starting to use it more, being more open with it. And I'm glad to hear that Aaron is doing something about it. I know Patrick King is looking to come to the high school and do some type of a program, and that's the focus. I mean, I think 600 feet is fine.
Vice Mayor.
Excuse me, I was concerned about speaking because I'm coughing, and I apologize if I start doing that. I appreciate what Councilmember Wolter has said. I've given this a tremendous amount of thought and done a lot of studying over the years of it, not just in the recent years, but all the way through, really, since the idea of legalizing cannabis became something that just might happen. And I've spoken to people, including educators in our family, about this. And I really have to agree with the thought that it is not whether it's 600 feet or 800 feet or 1,000 feet. You can have it 3,000 feet. You can have it 4 miles away. And that does not and has not stopped young people. Growing up, I'm a 60s kid, and I can remember that what prevented me from doing drugs in high school, and we're talking about the early 60s here, and marijuana was the least of the drugs that were available to you in those days in high school in the middle of New York City. What prevented me was the fact that I had seen the results of drug addiction throughout my childhood, because I grew up in a family that was involved in the theater and television and things like that, and I saw the destruction. And I also had a grandmother who told me point blank what could happen to you if you started and if that took over your life. And for that reason, I was able to resist, even when it was free. And I think that's what really matters, is that we educate our young people. Unfortunately, there are, as I mentioned at another council meeting, there are all kinds of temptations that young people have today. The least of which, frankly, is a dispensary. They can get online and find more hideous and problematic things than most of us would have dreamed of even 30 years ago, certainly than we would have dreamed of when I was that age. So I don't think that it has to do with the distance as much as it has to do with the fact that we educate our young people in families and in our society, and that's something that I think the people involved that I've spoken to in the cannabis industry are very interested in doing. They want to do that. They want to make sure that this legalization works the way it should work. So I don't disagree with the idea of 600 feet. I had to come to the conclusion that let's just do it.
So I don't disagree on the education part. I don't disagree on that having it 1,000 feet is going to stop youth that want to access it from being able to access it. I personally don't see any harm in having it 1,000 feet because the whole intent from the school district is not, they're not naive enough to think that that's going to stop kids from being able to access it. That's going to come through education and enforcement, but it is going to prevent them, hopefully, from viewing it while they're out on the fields, on the school grounds, throughout the day, looking at a sign that says dispensary with people coming and going. And I think that's what they're asking for. Certainly we know that they're going to be able to walk by it after school, and there's odds if they want to get it, they may be able to be successfully to get it from other friends and what have you. But I don't think that was the intent of the 1,000 feet. I think the intent was to basically, after much deliberation on their part, they feel it would be advantageous to the students not to be looking at it throughout the day from the fields. And I certainly don't see any harm in honoring that request. It's certainly not going to stop or make it inconvenient for people that want to access it to go to a dispensary to go the extra 400 feet. So I just don't understand why. And basically to say, thanks, but we're going to keep it where it's at because we don't think it's necessary. I really kind of wish we would have said that 3.5 months before we asked them to come back. So I feel it should stay at 1,000 feet. So I guess you're...
Well, Mr. Mayor, with all due respect, I'm still thinking that 600 feet is sufficient. And you're absolutely right. We asked the school to come up and to do some polling, and they did. And, you know, over the 3 months, over the 6 months, over the year and a half, we just constantly keep getting educated with this. And, you know, I'm of the opinion now that 1,000 feet, 400 feet, 4 miles, like Carol said, you know, as long as it's presented properly within that 600 feet, as long as there's a lattice or screens or no flashing lights, I think we'll be fine. So.
What I was going to say, and as long as the people we select to run these businesses are people that we can trust and people who will do what has to be done. And that's really at the core of this, isn't it? When you think about it. I'm much more interested in the people we select to run these businesses than I am in whether it's a few feet here or there. I have a feeling that we are seeing the next mayor, fast forward about 30 years, okay? Definitely, absolutely going to run for office, guaranteed, and it's going to win, too.
So I think we're hearing 2 are fine with the 600 and 1 is not.
Yep.
Okay, so that's where that's at. Everything else is good?
Yep.
Okay, so we can move on.
Okay. So the next issue, again, I combined a few issues. These changes, proposed changes to the ordinance involved some cleanup and updates to the ordinance to make sure we're lining up with the state regs as they change. And also, we removed the references to the specific state license numbers. The state just seems to be in flux so much that it seemed like, so we don't have to come back and keep doing updates. And we also clarified that sub-licenses that are being created by the state through the regulations are permitted so long as, you know, so long as the master type of license is permitted in the city. And there's also, I believe there's also language that talks about the city manager, you know, being able to make a similar use determination. But usually a sub-license is a licensee who only does one part of what the bigger license allows. And so we just wanted to make it clear that those are also permitted as long as the larger type license is permitted.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from council?
So, Kate, just for clarification, as these state regulations come down, we will be reviewing our ordinance to make sure that we're in line with that. And if there's
Yes.
any changes, we'll be notified whether we want to change our ordinance or not?
Yes.
Okay.
Because
I think the goal with when we create ordinances is to make them specific enough to implement your policy direction, but leave the language broad enough so that we're not hamstrung if things at the state do change. And state law obviously trumps our law,
Supersedes,
so,
yeah.
Right.
so we would always do that. But it's, the state regs are looking to be final, so I think we're in good shape where we are. They'll keep changing, I'm sure, but for right now, as we are, we're lined up, and if there's major changes, we would bring it back.
Okay.
Any other questions?
No.
Okay. No questions? Okay. That's good. I'd like to open this up to the public. Would anybody like to address the city council on issue number 3 and 4? Okay, seeing none, we'll bring it back to the council. I think we're all good with that.
Okay?
Okay.
And the next issue that you all discussed had to do with the number of dispensaries allowed and the permitting process for commercial dispensaries to determine if any updates were necessary. Currently, the ordinance allows a maximum of 2 retail dispensaries, cannabis, that means open to the public. And the consensus of the council at that last meeting was not to change the maximum number of 2. But to have an ad hoc committee in the near future review and fine-tune kind of the RFP and selection process for that remaining cannabis permit and future ones if they become available before opening up the permit process again. Just wanted to confirm that was what we heard.
Yes. At some point, too, I'd like to discuss the 2 applications that we have sitting in flux.
Right.
Before we wrap this up as well, so.
Yeah, we
Okay.
really need to do that.
But yeah, I'm fine with that, like that.
I'd like to complete that tonight, if we can.
So, are you, any questions on
No,
number 5?
not on what's here.
Number 5, okay. I'm going to open this up to the public. Would anybody like to address the city council on issue number 5? Seeing no one rise, then we'll bring it back to the city. I think we're, council, we're all good with that?
Okay.
Okay.
And the next issue had to do with zoning. There was already some comments on this. This also relates in some ways to the distance item. But basically, there was a discussion on the land use table that's part of this ordinance that states, which commercial cannabis uses are allowed in which zones. And the council recommendation that we heard a consensus on was eliminate cannabis uses in the downtown commercial zoning district, the TOD, the transit-oriented zoning district, but to grandfather in completed applications that have already been received by the city as of March 1st of this year. So this has been done both in the ordinance language and then also in the land use table. And we passed out a new version of the land use table because we realized when it printed for the packet, there were 3 footnotes that got eliminated. We apologize for that. So the permitted uses have been removed from that table in the TOD in the downtown. And then we also revised it to, upon review, we realized that there was some cleanup needed on the micro business uses and where those were allowed, and footnotes to say, if you're going to have a micro business in this zone, then you may have these types of uses, but not these, to just make it very clear what's permitted, what's not.
Okay, thank you. Questions from council?
No.
That sums it up nicely.
Okay. Well, I have to tell you, I do not support the grandfathering, and I would definitely support, because we're changing the rules, refunding any fees that those 2 applicants may have paid, and they could reapply under the new rules. But it seems senseless to me that we would want to eliminate downtown commercial district and transit district, but grandfather in a business that may be there for 30 years into the place that we're saying we don't want it. So I'm not real clear on that. So I do not support that, but with that said, you want to chime in?
I do, because, I've been hearing comments that, and I totally agree, the downtown commercial zoning, I don't want to see that changed. But the TOD, I'm starting to hear comments, why are we restricting
Yes.
that area?
Yeah, why specifically?
And
I don't have an answer.
And that's why I was kind of leaning towards grandfathering in anybody that's already submitted an application for those areas. But by the same token, if you want to do away with those, I'd like to propose that we do away with the TOD as well. And I mean, I understand what the TOD is for. That's for our transit-oriented. When the train comes to Cloverdale, that's going to be our little hub of low to moderate income housing, and we want to save that space. But by the same token, I'm not sure the train is coming. Times Square property is already spoke for. So I'm not sure why we want to keep the TOD in there. I know Councilmember Bagby was very concerned about having that as an area where nothing can go in, but I'm not so sure I'm agreeing with that anymore.
Yeah, if I may, Mr. Mayor, I feel the same way. I don't, as Councilmember Wolter, I'm fine with the downtown commercial, I can understand that. But the transit-oriented, I mean, first of all, we're restricting the number of businesses. So it's not as if we're going to have 16 people jammed into, specific areas here. We're only going to have 2. And I think that may last for quite a long time, if not forever. And I think we don't have a really intelligent answer, and there are too many questions that have arisen from too many people about why transit-oriented development district, particularly because we had 1 applicant there. And I think we need to clear all of that up and start afresh. And that's why I'm happy to eliminate the idea of not grandfathering. And we always say grandfather, and I think Patrick King is laughing because he knows what I'm going to say. I don't say we have to say grandmother and grandfather, just grandperson in someone. Sorry about that. I had to comment on that, or I would not be a feminist. And somebody would stop me and raise and yell at me about it. That's really the reason. At any rate, I do think we need to grandfather in any completed applications. We have 2 of them, so let's take care of both of them, and they have, you know, answers that make sense, and we didn't change the game on them in the middle. I just want to say one other thing. I think that's bad for business in general as a business person. It worries me if I go through the whole process and find out that for whatever reasons, the zoning suddenly gets changed.
Yeah.
And nobody can present me a real reason for doing it.
And
Not a healthy thing to do to businesses.
Mr. Mayor, I like your idea of refunding the fees if for any reason those don't go through, those 2. But I'd like to see us consider removing the TOD.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to go ahead and open it up for public input. Would anybody like to address the City Council on issue number 6?
Excuse me, sorry.
Don't make it eliminated.
Okay, Logan, I'm Aaron Gore. Just to give you some context, I think you're thinking about this a little bit incorrect compared to city development, how it could go. If you go to places like Aspen, or you go to places like Seattle, San Francisco, cannabis tourism is a big deal, and cannabis dispensaries, when done well, are really great for the community. If you look at Spark in San Francisco, they're out of Sonoma, they have Peace of Medicine in Santa Rosa. You want them in downtown commercial areas because of the foot traffic they bring. So they not only help their store, but they help the coffee shop next door, they help the market down the street. It's a real tourist destination, 1. And 2, it's part of the local ecosystem and local economy. You have to remember, you're serving tourists, but you're also serving people who have cancer, people who are in pain. Your customer base for dispensaries are people who need medicine. So you want it accessible, and you want it to be part of local businesses where they can also parlay off the benefits. With Cloverdale being a leader in the cannabis movement here in Sonoma County specifically, you could use this as a real opportunity to pivot downtown and not make it known for cannabis, right? Because that's not what we're about. But it could be integrated into the community in a way that's really beautiful and beneficial for everyone, and also very safe for our students and our kids. So I really think with the shortage of business locations specifically, you should not limit zoning. And 2, I think you should look at it from a value add perspective for downtown Cloverdale and not eliminate downtown Cloverdale from the potential mix for what it could bring for all the other businesses.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, council member, staff. My name is Bob Cox. I would like to address the zoning of the transit-oriented development. In my history as a planning commissioner and as a city councilman, that zoning area came about. And at that time, the anticipation was that Times Square would be full of high-density residential. And that was the reason that we considered transit-oriented development for that area. That no longer exists. So that would leave that one little triangle piece that we're talking about to be governed by transit-oriented development, which would limit it to just a few residences, not very many, even if you went 3 stories high. It would not be profitable for the builder nor for the city. I would like to see that area changed to a general commercial. It would work just fine, whether it's a dispensary or it's a quick stop or any kind of business that's now prohibited from being transit-oriented development. So for that reason, I would like to do away with transit-oriented development. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, City Council, City Staff, Chief Stewart, Sean Beauvais, Cloverdale. Thank you very much for, again, taking on this topic. I know this has been difficult and very time-consuming. I, too, would like to ask that you take into consideration what it is that cannabis is trying to do, out of respect for everyone, including the school board. My children, who are students here in Cloverdale, there is a concern. However, I'm afraid the only way for us to address it is to work together. By eliminating downtown commercial and the TOD, you're making it that much more difficult for cannabis people to do the right thing. Mr. Addison's correct when he addresses the student issues and things at our schools. I have children that recently attended there. However, I don't know that I necessarily agree that it's cannabis. Xanax is by far a far more serious problem at Cloverdale High School, and the kids are getting it from their mom and dad's medicine cabinets. To liken the idea that cannabis is responsible for that or somehow has some influence, I don't know is necessarily fair. You're talking about very good folks, Aaron Gore, Patrick King, people who have invested in this community for a very long time. These folks are leading that effort to educate our kids, to make sure that they're aware. I would ask that you just please don't make it any more difficult. Allow those good people to move forward in a timely manner. I love the idea of council being involved and of city staff and of the entire community. The school board, the neighbors, I think that it's great that you're taking into consideration everybody's opinion and everybody's point of view. But please, at the end of it, I'd like you to really focus on the fact that cannabis is very different than any other substance that we're likening it to. We make the comparison of alcohol, just not fair. We make the comparison to prescription paid drugs, it's just not accurate. So please, if you would, just take that into consideration. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to address the city council on this item? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to council.
Mayor, Council, if I can, just I want to shed a little bit of light on the TOD zoning district, just in general. I think staff has looked at the transit-oriented development zoning district and its requirements pretty closely, and what we have come to a conclusion is that there's really a need to overhaul that zoning district in its entirety. I know that that's not a matter that's discussed it's not on the agenda tonight. But I think it lends itself to why there's some decision, or why the TOD zoning district came up as an issue. When you look at the zoning ordinance and you look at TOD, it specifically does not permit pedestrian-oriented retail in that zoning district, specifically less than 2,500 square feet. And that just so happens to closely mirror the maximum size for a dispensary, which is 1,500 square feet. So a similar retail use in a TOD zoning district would not be permitted currently. And that's why I think there was a recommendation by one of the council members to eliminate cannabis-related businesses within the TOD zoning district. It's just to make it on the same playing field with other types of retail uses in the same district. We, however, as staff, don't think necessarily that that's appropriate for that zoning district. We think pedestrian-oriented retail should be a permitted use, but that opens up a whole nother issue for staff in terms of really reviewing and updating the ordinance to really be more reflective of the underlying zoning on property and TOD and what you want there, what do you want to see there in terms of land uses in the future. And as we work through the chart, there's in the zoning ordinance, the TOD is really kind of a residential zoning district, and I think that's kind of the basis for removing it if you support that. But also we recognize the comments made tonight and the council's comments. I think that if council wants to proceed in that direction, I think we should also look at the TOD zoning district and kind of revise it to update to make it more reflective of the other types of retail uses that maybe would be considered appropriate in that zoning district.
Also, Mr. Mayor, if the direction was changed to continue to allow retail dispensaries in the TOD, one of the reasons we had looked at it before was that residential piece. There's kind of an inherent conflict right now because TOD was added at the very end, if you remember, to the ordinance as a permitted place for dispensaries, and there wasn't time to really look at it. And then after we looked at it, we realized, okay, there's kind of an inherent conflict because you're not allowed to have a dispensary within 100 feet of a residential zone, yet TOD is a residential zone. So if the direction is to keep it in TOD, we'd probably have to then add additional language to let there be an exception for the residential setback to sort of specifically address TOD.
Well,
questions?
yeah, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to see us remove the TOD and allow dispensary to go in there. I just think we need to do that. And I also think, I agree with what the mayor said about refunding. If for any particular reason, the two RFPs that are sitting out there, if they're rejected, I think, because this has been such a moving target, and I feel like we pulled the rug out from under everyone, I'd like to see their money refunded to them. So that's how I feel on that.
Ditto.
So one question, there was a concern about the grandfathering in, sort of just this in perpetuity grandfathering. One option could be to grandfather those applications in for the next cycle of application review.
I don't want them grandfathered
Okay.
in at all.
And I think if we were to remove the TOD, I could do away with the grandfathering in. I just wanted to make sure that those investors that invested money, that they could still move forward with what they want to do on those locations in the commercial downtown and in the TOD. But if we're going to do away with the TOD, you know, the only one that would have to be grandfathered in would be the one that was going to be on the second floor of Antiques and Uniques.
Okay, and do you still support grandfathering in for that location?
No.
Well, either that or give them back their money. I mean, we've
Okay.
changed the ordinance on them, so.
So let's poll the council on this one. I support what Councilmember Wolter said, eliminating the transit-oriented zoning district from this and eliminating the grandfather.
Okay.
Okay, and with that, if somebody that we're eliminating from having the ability that paid a fee, and we change the rules, let's refund their funds.
Can I ask for clarification? I want to make sure you're both using the word eliminate in the same way. When you say eliminate, Councilmember Wolter, you mean eliminate it from this slide in terms of allow dispensaries in TOD?
Yes,
Okay.
I'd like to see dispensaries in TOD.
Okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
so, yeah, the only ones that be prohibited would be downtown commercial
Okay.
zoning
Yes,
district.
exactly.
Anybody that had an application to put a business in the downtown commercial zoning district would be eligible for a refund of their fee.
Yes. Mhm.
Okay.
That's, I'm sorry.
No, that.
I was just going to say, fine, I want to see us grandfather in the transit-oriented, and I agree that you certainly should be getting your money back at this juncture
And
in downtown
the
commercial.
transit-oriented
Zoning
zoning
district.
district would be removed. It's not
Yes.
going to be an eliminated.
It's not going to be restricted.
Yeah,
no.
so
Okay.
it's off. Is that what you're
Yes.
asking for? I support that. You
Yes.
support that. Okay.
Just for clarification, that means indicating on your land use table that TOD, the transit-oriented commercial zoning district, dispensaries are allowed subject to a cannabis permit within that zoning district.
Yes.
Okay.
But you do need to do some modifications because transit-oriented districts dealing with residents and the distance from that. So that's going to have to be cleaned up.
Right, we'll make.
Yeah, just clean it up a little bit, yeah.
We're noting the council's comments on the TOD, and we can probably footnote it appropriately to reflect some setback.
Perfect.
Clarification.
Yeah, okay.
Is that good?
Yes.
Okay, good, yes.
Okay. So that's
Move it on.
issue number 6. We can move on to number 8 now.
So issue number 8, there was a question about a new state regulation that specifically addresses certain elected and appointed officials and prohibiting them from holding commercial cannabis permits. And there was some discussion as to whether to create a regulation in our ordinance that will prohibit locally elected officials from receiving cannabis permits. And the consensus that we heard was, at this time, please do not add that kind of language to the ordinance.
Right. Yeah, we pretty much agreed that's a no-no, pull it.
So let me open it up. Would anybody in the audience like to address the city council on issue number 8? Seeing none, bring it back to council. I think we're all
I think
good
we're-
with
yeah,
that.
I think-
Okay, we'll move on to number 9.
And number 9 was simply minor cleanup throughout the ordinance, that we, clerical things and consistency issues, that it's just minor changes, nothing substantive really to note. It's all shown in the red line version of the document. So if there was any feedback on that, we can add that, but it'll all keep going, I think, to Planning Commission, if that's how you direct us.
Okay, perfect. Any
Okay.
comments?
Yes.
Yeah. It's fine, yeah.
Yeah.
Let me just open it up. Anybody in the audience want to address the city council on that issue number 9, which deals with the red line ordinance? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to council. We're good with that.
Yeah, fine.
So it's going to be, I mean, this is just an ongoing update as the laws change, procedures change, but this is going to be up to date as of when we re-adopt it.
Right.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
So, Mr. Mayor, if I can ask a question?
Please.
Before we move off this topic, when are we going to review the 2 applications that we have in the hopper now to look at, to see if we want to allow them to open their operations in Cloverdale?
Well, I would think, and I'm going to jump in, I would think we would not do that until this is finalized.
Yeah, that's
Number one.
Mm-hmm.
This has to be done. Then you're going to have to come back and decide whether we're going to just leave it to the 2 or reopen the whole process. And that's a decision that the city council will make after the ordinance is adopted.
Okay.
So I don't think that's something you can answer tonight. It's going to be, once the ordinance is adopted, I think the city manager's direction is come up with a plan of how you're going to proceed with this second dispensary. And go ahead.
That's correct, Mayor. And as we discussed earlier, the council supports formation of an ad hoc to review the RFP. And at that time, the ad hoc could also make a recommendation on those 2 outstanding dispensary applications and how the council would like those to be treated, including whether there's refunds and they're recommended to be invited back to the process, or some other decision on those. But I think that's an appropriate role for the ad hoc to kind of address is updates to the RFP and treatment of the 2 outstanding
So you may want to put it as a standing item on one of the subcommittees where the ad hoc, it's going to be an ad hoc, but there should be an update, I would think, at each council meeting, kind of get updating the council and the public as to where we're at on the process and what we could expect. So based on the ordinance updates, what the timeline is, when it's going to go to planning, so the public's informed, council's informed, and so there should be regular updates on this topic.
Staff agrees, Mayor. I think what we do as a first step is bring back to the council, appointment of the ad hoc, so that council can decide who they would like to see as to be the members of that, and then we'll start so the public outreach on and the communication out to the community from the ad hoc on recommendations for those RFPs.
And just two more questions, Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
When will this come back to the city council for approval? It's going to the planning commission first? So that'll be what, after the first of the year, probably?
Probably after the first of the year.
Okay. And then secondly, we've talked so much about this, I should know this, but we agreed that all licenses for dispensaries and any other cannabis business would be approved by the city manager and the assistant city manager. And if it's not approved and the individuals want to appeal, they can come back in front of the full city council. So where I'm going with that, David, is the 2 applications that we have on file will be approved or disapproved by city staff.
No.
Council did not direct the changes to the ordinance on the RFPs for dispensaries. It had to do with everything else but that topic. That's an issue that's, at least in the existing ordinance, clearly defined, would be a council decision.
I guess everybody's okay with it the way it is coming in front of the full city council?
Yeah, we need to do that
Okay.
in the beginning. and
Well,
just,
I won't be here, but I would prefer to have staff. I'd like to see that change. I think only ones that should come to the council is if it's an appeal, staff's decision.
Yeah, ultimately, it belongs to staff. I just
I
want to make
believe
sure that council, particularly new folks, become accustomed to it, and the city becomes accustomed to it, so we understand a little bit more.
So,
what we're doing, because it's not only, it's an entirely new business that we're getting involved with.
But the current ordinance requires all dispensaries to be approved by the full city.
it does, because there's only two, and it's a competitive process the way it's set up now. And so council was pretty adamant previously that the dispensaries, not the other businesses, but the dispensaries would come before the full council for approval.
Yeah.
And that's
And
still the
that's
direction.
still in
Okay,
place.
just checking.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not so sure, though, that, you know, with the new council coming on board, we might want to look at that. I mean, quite frankly, it caused such a shitstorm. You know, when everything came in front of the city council, it was like just helter-skelter. And I think it divided the community, and that's not what we're here for. It's almost like the city council sets up the guidelines. Here's the criteria. If you meet it, and as long as there's no more than 2 dispensaries, but if you meet the criteria, city staff approves it, and if they disapprove it and you want to appeal it, just like anything else, you come to the city council. But I'm just throwing that out there.
So that's not on the table for tonight, but I do think that's a conversation the new city council should have, because I agree with you. I don't think it should be a popularity. I think it should be based on facts. And if if it's appealed, the staff will have the reasons why it was denied, and city council can weigh in on the facts, not a popularity thing. So that may be something on future agenda items, that item come back to the full city council and they can weigh in on that.
Yeah. Kate, may I, Mr. Mayor? Kate, what is your experience with other cities that have cannabis ordinances? Is that process approved by the council, or?
Typically with dispensaries, yes. Typically the dispensary permits go to the full council or at least the planning commission. Some discretionary approval is required, particularly when you're limiting the number, and it makes it more of a competitive process to choose an operator that you think will be successful and a good match for your city. So, because I will pretty much guarantee that whomever does not get the permit is going to appeal. So it's going to come before the council anyway if they did it the other way.
Yeah, but the appeal would come with facts, and the council would be reviewing the facts and making a decision on the facts. It wouldn't be, but anyway, that's a conversation for another day.
Okay.
Okay, so with that, we're going to move on to the subcommittee reports, and we'll start with the airport and Vice Mayor Russell.
We have our meeting coming up. I just lost the page.
Let's get
I
our
won't be here.
council member.
Oh.
We can find Councilmember Brigham.
Did you want to open it up to the public one more time?
We're done. Yeah, well, we covered everything. Please let the record show that Councilmember Brigham has rejoined us, and we are on subcommittee reports.
Subcommittees.
So,
Anyway,
Vice-
with airport, it is to be determined. I'm assuming that it will be in the new year.
Okay. Okay, Finance, Administration, and Police, Councilmember Brigham.
Yeah, I can't comment on the first part because I missed the first part of the meeting.
Yeah.
And Gus chaired it, but it was a pretty interesting meeting. Gus, you want to take the first part?
What part was that? Well, at this point in time, I've talked to David and Chief Stewart, and as a result of that Police Finance Subcommittee meeting, there was, as most of the council knows, there was quite a uproar about some of the problems that we're having in the city with individuals. And I'm not going to use the word homeless because not all of them are homeless. But there's been a few instances with situations going on down along the river. And that meeting we had on a Thursday. City Hall was closed on Friday. That Monday, we met with Councilmember Brigham, City Manager Kelley, and Chief Stewart, and we came up with a plan. We made a phone call to North Coast Rail Authority. They gave us permission to go onto their property, post no trespassing signs, which we did, thanks to Craig Johnson. I mean, he just tackled that project. We walked the railroad tracks, Kevin Thompson, myself. Who else was with us? Officer Camara was there, and
Jimmy.
and
Jimmy.
Craig.
The dog.
Yeah, no, Jimmy wasn't there. And then Craig was there as well. It was, geez, you know, I thought I knew how homeless lived, but I was way off. It was just deplorable how they lived, you know, and then later Ricky Rhodes joined us, and in the tunnel, in the tunnel there for North Coast Rail, one of the individuals sleep there, and he was telling us that when he goes in there in the evening and puts his light on, the rats just run. And as soon as he shuts the light off, they come back, and they sleep with these homeless people like pets. Food containers, trash, it's such a mess. Getting back to North Coast Rail, they said that we could, at the entrance there where First Street meets Asti Road, we can take down that shed if we wanted, and they would reimburse us the fees for that. The unfortunate thing is it's made out of fiberglass, so now it triggers some hazmat issues. But hopefully we're going to have the wherewithal to take that down. They said we can go on their track, we can weed whack whatever we want to do, we can clean out all the trash. So we're still, I think, trying to formulate a plan on how we're going to do that. But the officers, you know, I can't give them enough credit for what they do going back there dealing with those people. John Camaro knew every one of them by name, and when he talked, they sat up and they listened to him. He's got their respect. And he shared with me, and I'm hoping that we can purchase for them a mule that they can ride up and down back there, because they can't get back there with their patrol cars and patrol it the way they'd like to. So I know I jumped all around, and I'm going to ask David maybe to jump in and give an update on what we've done so far. I know you also have an action plan that I'm excited about implementing, but we just need to let the community know that things are getting done. So,
go ahead.
Mayor, with your permission, I'll give you an additional update on some of the actions that have been taken that is an outcome of the workshop or the discussion at the Finance, Admin, and Police Subcommittee. We want to note that staff took a lot of the comments to heart and recognized that there are impacts to the community, and I think we jumped into action pretty quickly, starting with development of kind of what we're referring to as a strategic plan framework that addresses, has a number of strategic initiatives, 7 that kind of target different areas around homelessness, one in particular that I want to address is a role in partnering with Sonoma County, particularly Sonoma County Sheriff's Office, in really doing a more thorough assessment of homelessness encampments within Cloverdale and in our surrounding area along the river and other areas where we have a sense that there are encampments located, so that we can really address and assess, what we have in terms of a homelessness population, what are some of the activities that are occurring within those encampments, and to really better understand the numbers. There was a lot of discussion at the subcommittee about, concerns about the number of homelessness, and there was a lot of numbers that varied pretty significantly. And so one of the things is kind of a follow-up to that strategic plan framework was some outreach to our Sheriff-elect Essick and the Sonoma County Sheriff's Office about partnering with our police department to kind of to do some assessment work, and they've agreed to do that. And with Chief Stewart's assistance, we'll be reaching out to kind of form more formally a partnership to work with them and develop a plan to do that that assessment, so we can really get a handle on the extent of the homelessness in our environs. One of the things that we also heard was a concern about the impact of homelessness on our business community, and as a result of that, Chief Stewart met with our chamber director, Nina Hanchett, and has developed a business survey. It's not specifically addressing necessarily homelessness, but it's intended to get feedback from the business community about some of the issues that they're confronting, and can be a valuable tool for gathering data from our business community to, again, help us develop, one, have a clear understanding of the problem, but also to identify potential solutions, and including, as part of that business survey, garnering interest in establishing, a business policing program similar to what we have for residential properties, so that, really kind of get the business owners invested in addressing some of the issues that affect them. And so I think, one of the things we'll be moving forward is we hope this framework is going to be kind of a report out from the Finance, Admin, and Police Subcommittee back to council, and the council then can decide, whether they support those initiatives, whether there's some modification. I know I've already garnered some comments and feedback from council about things they'd like to see in that framework, and I think those are things we can incorporate in there. Ultimately, we were going to recommend you form a group that then can kind of finalize this plan, and then we can start implementation, in the spring. So we're really continuing this progress and effort that we've made in the short term to continue it in the mid to long term, including like the actions the council took tonight to adopt the HEAP resolution, so we can start, seeking funding to kind of help us do some of the things, again, that are identified in that plan framework. One question for council is, we've identified that the next meeting is to be determined. It just so happened that the next regular scheduled meeting date falls on Thanksgiving holiday, and so obviously staff and the council would like to observe that holiday. Whether you'd like to reschedule a special meeting before the end of the year, and if so, staff can coordinate with Councilmember Wolter and Councilmember Brigham on a date that would work. If you'd like to schedule one in December, we'd obviously have to notice it as a special meeting, but we're happy to do that if you'd like.
Well, good. You might want to coordinate that with the chair of that committee.
If I could, Mr. Mayor, Mary Ann is the chair of that committee. Unfortunately, I will be out of town from the 15th to the 3rd of December. So if the chair decides to have it the first week in December, I'm available. If she wants to have it before then, I'm not. And just one more thing, the intent of going down there and posting the no trespassing signs was to encourage those individuals to move along and seek some type of help. It wasn't to go down there and harass them. There's all kinds of services. Officer Camaro is well versed on what they are. I know Mary Ann has spoken to a few of them down there, but everyone that we encountered when we did that walk that day were just stoned out of their heads. I mean, it was not a pretty sight. So that's it.
Thank you.
I would like to make a couple comments on this issue. I think the biggest problem we have is that we really don't have any kind of mental health up here at all. And I know it's hopefully coming, but Colleen even mentioned that at the last meeting we had. We have a huge hole in that, and we also don't have anywhere to put them. If people come to us and are seeking the help, we don't have the infrastructure set up for intake. But the mental health issue, a lot of the people down there, I can think of 3 or 4, excuse me, but the smoke is getting to me in the air.
Yeah, really.
There's at least 4 or 5 people down there that I know of that desperately need mental health help, and probably meds that they're not getting. So I don't quite know how we're going to handle this posting and then moving people on, but we will work with all the groups.
I think the right start is identifying the size and the magnitude of the problem, going after the state funding that just opened up, trying to collaborate, because every city can't afford to have a shelter. There's going to have to be one shelter that we all participate in. We'll probably need to be talking about ways to transport, how to access those services. But I think we're on a roll of trying to do that. I know the resolution that we adopted this evening for the HEAP funding, is that HEP funding? And hopefully working, collaborating with the county, it really improves the odds of being able to get some of those funds, coming up with a strategic plan on where the shelter is going to be, how it's going to be staffed, what services are going to be available, talking about the transportation aspect. I think we're moving in the right direction. But it's a real problem throughout the state, throughout the country.
If I
Yes,
might,
Vice
Mr. Mayor,
Mayor.
thank you. Thank you, everyone, for bringing this up. In the report, council report for this 2-week period, I discussed the fact that I attended today's meeting of our official Health Action chapter. And I have to tell you, I want to thank our Assistant City Manager for attending, and I want to thank our City Manager for attending in the past as well. This is very, very important. I am more excited about what's going on, thanks to today, than I have been, and I've been excited for a couple of months now, particularly because of the work that Rebecca Ennis is doing, but also the work that our local organizations are doing. We had a training session, and I'm bringing it up because all of the things we've been talking about, whether it is adolescent drug problems, whether it is homelessness, whether it is food distribution, are things that the Health Action chapters, the 9 chapters, which now include Cloverdale, around the county are working on. And Bob Cox, former council member, Bob Cox was there today too, and I'm delighted. This doesn't mean that we have solutions, but it does mean we have a place where we can share information, not only amongst ourselves, but with people outside of our city and around the county and even the region, for getting information and seeing what resources we can hook up on. So I just want to encourage the new council coming in to make sure that we have a representative to Health Action, which all cities do, and that would be a representative on the council, the Health Action Council, which is about 40-something of us right now, who are the leaders of the Health Action program here for the county, and also someone who will be able to spend time at those meetings, once-a-month meetings of Health Action. That would be fabulous. It just so happens that I was looking at you when I said that.
Yeah, I'll take it.
Great, thank you. Anyway, I didn't mean to go on, but it was appropriate.
Get me in the email chain.
Yeah.
I think the mic was maybe is it working? Okay, thank you. We'll move on to the planning community development, and it'll be Councilmember Brigham.
Our next meeting is in December, I believe.
December 18th.
Yep, the 18th at 3 p.m.
Okay, very good. And the Public Works, that'll be Vice Mayor Russell.
Thank you, sir. The Public Works will meet next on November 27th at 10:30 a.m. in City Hall.
Thank you. And the Joint City Fire District, we don't have a meeting date selected, but they're fairly busy right now, and so I'm thinking it'll be after the first of the year. And the Joint City School District, we have our next meeting scheduled for November 19th. It's at 5 o'clock, City Hall Conference Room. And now we'll move on to council reports. I'd like to start with our student liaison. Tucker Morgan, please. And please speak into the mic.
Yes. So for recent news, our varsity football team has their playoff game Saturday night against Kelseyville. Both girls and boys soccer teams went far in playoffs. Unfortunately, the boys lost to Fort Bragg and the girls team lost to Eureka. The cross country team has NCS this Saturday. The wrestling program is up and going, which is good. The Citrus Fair Queen signups are over last week. The fall play, November 31st and December 1st. The end of the grading period was last Friday. And the SRJC workshop for seniors 5 days a week at the high school. And lastly, I'd like to thank the veterans for their service and to never forget for what they did. So, yeah.
Well, thank you. Great report. Thank you. Okay, council members, anything to report? No, Mr. Mayor. Okay. Vice Mayor.
I've completed my report, Mr. Mayor. I will tell you that I am very happy about the fact that Sonoma County Transit Authority has approved the 2019 Measure M strategic plan, and my report has the information about where you can access that. I'm also excited about the fact that there is a new program that Regional Climate Protection Authority is working on, and as you know, I chair both of those. We are developing an online community challenge that will help folks understand climate solutions and work together. And I've suggested, and Reese Foxon, our library commissioner and the chair of the library commission now, has agreed to get in touch with these folks at RCPA and talk to them about having the program in the library available for everyone, so that folks who don't have a computer will have access. I also requested, and I don't know how quickly this will happen because it's a program that is, I think, a national one. I've requested that it be bilingual, especially these days when you can translate it. The Health Action, there was example of how many, 20 languages that you could just click the button and it would translate reasonably well, so there's no excuse for not doing that. But anyway, there's a lot of good stuff coming down next year. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Graham?
A quick update on the Grange. We've gotten enough money donated now to do all the windows are now have been replaced. They're double pane. They actually work. They don't slam down on your fingers. Bruce came through again, Bruce and Darlene Reuser.
That's nice.
And so now we've got the money covered for all the painting and hopefully interior, exterior. And I've got a line on another little pocket of money in case we run out on that one.
Fantastic.
So that looks like it's going to be finished up in the next couple months.
Oh, that's fabulous. Let's go.
Fabulous news.
Great.
Thank you. Okay, the only thing, my report's in the packet. The only thing I just want to elaborate on is, it came up earlier during public comments on the swimming pool. It looks like hopefully before the swim season opens, it'll be heated. We'll have a nice state-of-the-art solar system installed and make the pool much more usable, much more desirable. The ad hoc committee is going to regroup now to talk about a fundraiser to try to equip the pool with some proper furniture, chairs, umbrellas, to make it and try to raise money to really make it a nice, desirable place to go. And the city, I'm going to be talking to the city manager, we need to go to phase 2, which is the operational agreement with the county. We really need to work through, now that we know it's going to be heated, we want to come into who's going to actually manage the pool, how that's going to work, and so we can start putting programs in. So it's moving in the right direction. Hopefully all this will be in place before the swim season starts in May. So that's our objective. So, okay, with that, we'll move on. City manager report?
No reports, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. City attorney report?
No report.
Okay, council direction on future agenda items? Anything?
I don't have a microphone, so I'll just yell. No, of course not. Mr. Mayor, you're very modest, when it comes to that swimming pool. The public should know that Mayor Palla was the one that pushed for that program with James Gore, and because of his relentlessness, we now have a solar system for that pool. So Joe should get a lot of that credit. So thank you, Joe.
Thank you. It's a collaborated effort between everybody, but thank you. Okay, any future agenda items?
No.
Okay, so we will move forward to adjourn to our next regular city council meeting, which will be Tuesday, December 11th. There will not be a second meeting this month due to the Thanksgiving holiday. So the next meeting will be December 11th. Closed session is tentatively set for 5 o'clock. Public session will be 6 o'clock. Closed sessions at the City Hall conference room. Public sessions here at the Performing Arts.
And that is the transition.
And that will be when be Vice Mayor Russell and my last official meeting, and the new council will be sworn in and seated. So it'll be an exciting meeting. Hopefully you could all be here. With that, we're adjourned. Thank you. Thank you, staff. Thank you, everybody.
All right, let me fill this
Thank you. Appreciate it.